Hello, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here on this unbelievably sunny, unseasonably so April evening in Tralee, County Cork in Ireland. And if you hear the sounds of delight outside, it's children playing in the sunshine, and we will never get them to bed. I'm absolutely honoured to help welcome and herald this book into being by Esther. I'm just going to introduce her and speak a little bit about the book, and then Esther is going to read for about 20-25 minutes, and then we're going to have a chat, and then we'll open up to Q&A. And I'm really, really excited to hear the poems as well as to speak to her about the process of putting this wonderful book together. Catherine-Esther Cowie is a poet, a fiction writer, and a visual artist. She was born on the Caribbean island of St. Lucia and lived there until the age of 13 before migrating with her family, first to Canada and then to the USA. She's currently based in Illinois and is joining us from there. Cowie's poems have been published widely, including in PN Review, Prairie Schooner, and Southern Humanities Review, among many others. A Callaloo Creative Writing Fellow, her work has been nominated for AWP Intro Journal, a Pushcart Prize, and Best New Poets 2018 and 2019. Her visual art was also nominated for the Best of the Net Anthology in 2023. And we are gathered, as I said, here today in virtual union to celebrate this, the online launch of her brilliant, arresting, and utterly original debut collection, Heirloom, with Carcanet Press. The collection opens with two epigraphs that are startling in their intention. Quote, "If I tell you all the stories, how will you know which ones are true, which you can eat, which ones eat you?" And that's from Work by Bloodlight by Julia Buswama. And also a quote from René Girard from The One by Whom Scandal Comes, which states, quote, "All cultures and all individuals without exception participate in violence. Violence is what structures our collective sense of belonging and our personal identities." And this incredibly daring, brilliantly brave, and shockingly original book really explores those stories, the layers of narratives of violence, past dysfunction, tyranny, and terror, and especially how these structures form and reshape the lives of 4 generations of women as explored in the collection. And we are witness to what they pass down to each other, what they hand down to one another, the heirlooms, I suppose, of place, lineage, love, laughter, family, and the ever-present beauty of the island of St. Lucia, along with its tortured and difficult colonial and post-colonial history. We are called on by these poems to question the difference between unforgetting and remembering, speaking out and silence, and to weigh up the cost of these stories of the past being told. Do they bring peace, or do they create a further violence? I am delighted and honoured to introduce Catherine-Esther Cowie, reading from her Poetry Book Society recommended debut collection, Heirloom, live from Illinois. Congratulations, Esther. Take it away.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Oh, okay. Did I disappear? Oh, I'm still there. Okay. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone who's coming. I see my family's here and lots of my poetry friends. And thank you, Carcanet. Thank you, Victoria. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so grateful this day has arrived. I feel a little emotional, but it was a long process. So thank you, everyone. So the first poem I'm going to read is from the prelude of the book, and the prelude of the book sets up the context that these 4 generations of women come from. And it's called Origin Begs for Him. Then I devoured their wooden faces, their invisibility. Disappeared the scent of ochre earth and savannas, carried their people to a new sun. I stole the letters, shoved A, B, C, D, E down their throats. How they stumbled blind, begging for a mirror, a piece of glass. And as it pleased me, they brought forth cane and cocoa and every fruiting tree. And as it pleased me when I said dance, they danced. And when I said strike your brother's cheek, they struck. Wasn't I a servant to them too? Their stifled sounds pressed into the letters I gifted. They begot a bastard tongue, a burst, shout, long song. Without me, they are without jazz, reggae, or calypso tune. Without me, there is no speech of the world. If there are flowers, give me flowers, praise songs. Without me, you are not. I am. Your father's hand against your mother's mouth, her air filling with dirt. I build a loom in her belly. Spin you, daughter, complete with claws, fangs, and fur. And now the next poem that I'm going to read is from Leda, the section called Leda, and she is the great-grandmother um, in the four generations of women. And this poem is called Blessed Be My Unwed Head. To what angel did I concede? Let it be as you decree, a body for the will of a man. That I was 16, that he married to my sister, did not matter, body for an apathetic God. No spirit overshadowed, ruptured his seed, or the throbbing vein in his sun-spotted neck. I am consoled. At least I wasn't dragged into the bush by some nobody. Oh, hail the extramarital bed of the kitchen floor, and nature, indifferent to circumstance, to my will, does not break her order, her law. Mercy, 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 there must be miracle. No wise men visit, only the matriarchs, rotten-toothed and stinging, their gifts, the back of a hand, fists, and a crown called skettle. What figure do I cast in this family portrait? A darkening frame for this haloed child? She has put on his power, her pale skin blessing her bastardness clean. To ten, to suckle and bath, another body siphoning my life. How the noise in my head grows and grows, splinters into phantoms and shapes. Graceless muses for her courtmobile. How I terror. And the next poem I'm going to read, it's a little bit lighter. It's called My Englishman, St. Lucia, 1942. Um, he here for the war, he a captain of a ship, his skin red like a slap, he here fine, fine. I meet him in the rum shop, jut my hips so and so, shake up my shoulders like that, like that. He face catch a look like bon, soon we living up together in the capital. And the next poem I'm going to read, it's called Poem in Which I Am Negma War. And the Negma War were freedom fighters that fought alongside the French during the French Revolution. And for 4 years, they held off the British. You can call them Maroons. They wanted independence, they wanted freedom, they believed in their humanity, and they were willing to endure hardship, snake bites, etc., for their independence, for their survival, for their freedom. Now, the poem isn't necessarily about that particular freedom fighter, those freedom fighters, but it's about that desire for freedom that we all feel or desire when we feel sort of oppressed in our lives. The door in the cow field cried, "Come." Through the kitchen window, I saw. I left everything, my sons, my daughters, and him. I smalled myself into the door's dark entry. My body followed, heavy-footed and full of blood scent. Of course, he pinned her face down in the mud, dragged her back to the house. What happened after, I don't know. Of her suffering, do not tell me. I only know that she gave me up. Now we sit together in the asylum's white-walled room, her tongue swole and chewed through. Her fingers flick at the ants trailing out of the cracks in the walls. I small myself again, squeeze through. And the next poem, the last poem from this section, is called Memoriam, after Carlos Drummond's Residue. Only a little of me remains, a fixture, mad woman locked in a downstairs room, forward gag, muffler. Of my ravings, the upstairs had nothing. But still, a little of me will stay. The stink of me in the sheets, on the walls, on their tongues, wagging, wagging all night long about my bad romances. Stupid woman, sad woman, object lesson. Of my illness, they talk too much. I am spectacle, spectre, fire lover, wandering off into the bush, the market square. My early morning peep shows, the breaking day. Someone forgot to lock my room again. The music loud in my head, how I shook the neighborhood awake with my naked breasts. My grandchildren cried, their friends can't come over. And of those things I remember so little, so little. Why can't they do the same? Of the things I enjoy, they won't remember. The morning doves nesting in the monstrous breadfruit tree, rum thrown back, going deep down between my legs, my hair brushed and slick and smoothed into a bun, my yellow satin ribbons. Of God, am I against, for, or indifferent? They've never asked or cared to know. My mother, father, their names, already they've forgotten. Of my love of white, they'll remember cotton dresses bleached in a blinding sun. My men, always, always fair. Of me so little will remain, stripped and pet down to a fear, bright and blossoming in the back of a young girl's head. Ufu, 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 ufu. And ufu means you are crazy in Saint Lucian Creole. So the next section I'm going to read is Marie, and she is the grandmother in this four generations of women. And the poem is called Early Morning Rescue. You search the blue dawn for your mother. She scents of smoke and burnt matches. You steer her back to the house. Soon, your stepfather will wake, demand tea and bread, snatch her by the hair, rattle until you yell, I'll make it. Sometimes you want to push her towards the open gate, watch as she walks right into the side of a speeding pickup truck. There would be no more sound, the hitting and the wailing and the insults when you snatch the box of matches from her hand. And the next poem I'm going to read is called The Outside Child. I will not disappear, dead myself in a bush somewhere. The freak lives, sucks air. I have a face that is not so unlike hers. Perhaps that's what troubles. I am the final blow, the betrayal, so close, under her roof, in her bed. The man she so loved loved me, raised me in her house. Unnatural thing that I am, a sin, offspring of a predator and a prey. That grows and grows, has a mammalian face, hands, feet, a voice like the blackbird's, high-pitched and singing. In my wildest dreams, I hug her, children, my cousins, they are my brothers and sisters. How they insult, mother killer, daughter of a skettle. I blossom bright, draw nearer still, allow their biting bites, the sharp of their teeth, the only intimacy. My flesh an epiphany. I am. Love me. And the next poem I'm going to read is called Easterners. And I may sing a little bit at the end. I'm not the best singer, so I might sing a little the last four lines at the end. So bear with me if I'm off tune a little bit. Easterners, you are butcher man's son. I a landowner's daughter. Some people don't like the song of us. You're a dark-skinned man, I a fair-skinned woman. My people don't like our getting on. But I sing my victory sweet. You a stained man, never blacked my eye, never cursed me out. And when the lights laid low, you pull out a banjo. Oi, 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 oi. Ou se la vie mwe, ou se che mwe, ou se l'amour mwe. Merci, merci, bodier. And the last lines are in Creole and they translate to English. You are my life. You are my heart. You are my love. Thank you, God. And then the last poem in this collection is called Reasons to Hit a Child. Sorry, not in this collection, in this section, sorry. Um, because the sun grows, sorry, let me start over. Reasons to hit a child. Because the sun grows in her left eye. Because a misfired belt buckle. Because her skin hasn't turned, and because the neighbors gossip that a white man sleeps under your bed. Because if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. Because the porridge sticky pan still sits on the stove. Because her mouth is so full of your name, Mama, Mama, Mama. Because as a child you snapped branches in two, kept time to a hand slapping your mother's face. Because rage has its own flight. Because there's a pleasure in pinching flesh until it flashes red. Okay. And then the next section that I will read is called The Daughters. And these are the daughters of Marie, the granddaughters of Leda. And the first poem is called On Repetition. Give me Sunday afternoons, my front porch, my child right here by my side, banging some toy into its broken parts. Hear my tongue winged and repeating the same blues a woman shuddered and struck. I ruffle my daughter's hair, sing. I touch the woman, bruised cheek. Touch my face, stinging. My mother said she never touched my face. In that song, the man hit the woman. In that song, my mother said she never. And the next poem in this section I will read is called A Bedtime Prayer. We ate the fruit, Lord, boiled and buttered we ate, thought nothing of it. It was pleasing to the eye, filled our belly, our mouths, our bellies. It was the fruit of a breadfruit tree, a tree as old as the first city. How it grew taller than the house, those monstrous leaves. Its roots echoing, cracks in the walls, its shadow falling through the back door, the corridor, lengthening towards the front. Ghost of our first father, ghost begetting ghosts. Our lives thinned into his weakness, his terror, but we were fed, fed, fed. Lord, you have cast us off, left us to starve, sent that girl born with a veiled face, a call calling. How did she find the axe? She wouldn't eat the fruit, refused its she wouldn't eat the fruit, refused its sweetness. Weight of our father, the first city. Lord, she went down to the garden, an axe flowering in her hand. It was you, Lord, the Buddha blanc chirping in her ear. What cruel instructions! Didn't we do your will? Kept a remembrance? The tree, our father? We were hungry, Lord. The tree fell into the house. And the last poem in this section I'm going to read is called Rescue. 1. The freak, dark-headed beast knocks at my cupboard door. I have kept quiet, not a sound, even when the daddy long legs mounted my nose. She has sniffed me out, calls, Mommy. What terrifies? The oven, the flour, the butter pulling on the counter? What a test of love. My husband wants homemade bread. It's easy, he said. What a test of love to understand the workings of a clock, a rug, a water filter, the proportion of yeast to flour, the measure of a dash, a dab, a dabble of salt, a misfixer-upper, maker of things I am not. The bread is hard, hard like a rock. It will break the teeth of our guests coming for dinner. Oh, what terrifies! He'll turn into Mama. How you can't cook up to now? 2. My daughter knocks again. She's 4, a voice so sharp, a seam ripper. I lead her to the sea, roiling at the back of our house, our arms full of bread rolls, stones. What is a daughter? Small rescue tearing towards the shoreline, rolls falling like a trail of droppings. She flings the bread into the waves. I will tie my waist with a string to hers, my little boy. And now the last section is called Catherine. And the first poem I will read is also called Catherine. When slavery ended, Catherine mashed up her name, became Catish, discarding the sound of breeze, rifling through the cane, discarding the sound of massa, master, between her thighs. St. Lucia, 1986. Because she did not have your coloring, because of your own affliction, you name her after your likeness. Then you thought of your errant climb up the rain tree, a midnight deer, tied your school ribbon to a branch, how it is still there, blue, tattered and flailing. Gave her a second name. A hyphen. I walk the plank between the two names. Call me Esther. The Hebrew free root letters mean to hide, hidden. She is her father's daughter. You teach her hands your quiet ways. A plate, an open mouth, the gift of white shatter, never having to say, I hate you. Chicago, 2018. These days I wear my blood-hemmed name, write Catherine on every application, every journal, every poem. Sound of my mother, name I once detested. Sound of an image that is not me. Sound of my fear, repetition. Sunday afternoons she sprawls on the couch, her white legs peeking from under her skirts. Her voice singing, Doo-doo darling, stay sweet. Am I then memory or prophecy? Swell of her hurt, her sweetness. Unscrew my skull, dislodge the tape, strew her sound through the trees. I wear my name like my hair, the way it screams of a different sun, of Macola blue, of the great Odum. I will not knife the French and English out of my tongue, this heirloom cruel and sweet. My white ancestors roll, roll, roll. I've been sewn into their line. And then the next poem I'll read from this section is called Outside My Window. And this poem references some historical figures. I forgot the correct name for them, but the English name or the European reference to them is the Dahomey Amazons. And they were warriors in the Kingdom of Benin. And I think a movie was made of them. So here we go. Outside my window, a dog, her underbelly, fat hanging tits. I think of the Dahomey Amazons, women who never knew a man, never bore a child, whose breasts so stunned the Frenchmen they couldn't shoot. The Amazons severed their heads. I have longed to suckle at their tits. Minnow, mothers, I would cry, each drop possessing what? Pride, prophecy, a way forward. My own legend, a woman forced who stayed, because sugar cane and cocoa failed, because a 1930s rural town, he, a landowner, because she was only a girl, 16, because a song of shame fattens on its own repetition. I reach for another. But what of Minnow's song? Wild march to the battlefield. Her shame. We are men, not women. If I am the call, Minnow, mother, what of her response? I have no daughter.
Was abs am I unmuted? Yes, I am. That was absolutely extraordinary, Esther. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to hear those poems together and speaking to each other across time, in different intonations and different rhythms and different rhymes. There's amazing, right? It's amazing to hear, as always, when you hear especially the poet reading their own work, just unlocks so many other connections. It was really beautiful reading. Thank you so much. And it's so wonderful to get to talk to you now about this incredible book. And I just wonder, especially as I have been living with it for a couple of weeks now and becoming more and more fascinated by particularly the location of it and how that seeps into every single aspect of how the people who populate this book interact with each other and view themselves. And I just wonder, when you started writing, was it when you were in St. Lucia, when you were a
Ye-
child, or?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did, and I think I would say it's because of my mom because she was an English teacher and she would bring books home and I would read them. I had no idea what they meant because she was teaching English at the high school secondary level. But yeah, I think it started there, just reading books and wanting to write my own book.
And did you feel that from a very early age? And did you feel that when you were living in St. Lucia till you were 13, if
Oh
I'm
yes,
correct?
most
Yeah.
definitely. I remember maybe when I was 5 or 7, I wrote this book called A Strange Woman, and my dad helped me staple the pages together. And then in primary school, started a newspaper with my friends. I think my friend Dome, who I've known for over 20 years, is here, so he can attest to that. And we also were part of a poetry club as well. So yes, always loved writing. Was doing it from the time I was very young.
Was really struck by how writing and the body and the location that these poems are set all seem to speak to each other. And I was just really interested in St. Lucia's literary history, but also, I suppose, how it is part of your literary history too, and how it has become a source of huge inspiration for you, obviously, but also maybe more potent as you have moved to almost its opposite, you would argue, particularly to Canada, moving from this island nation of sunshine to a kind of huge mass of what I would consider mostly cold. And I just wondered, was it something in terms of place that you saw St. Lucia differently when you moved away, or did you try and replicate it in some way by writing about it, or what was your relationship to it when you were there and also once you moved so
Yeah.
much?
I mean, like, I think the country is just so much a part of my identity and self. I think when very young, I would always say like the sun and the oceans are in my bones. And so for me, St. Lucia is just I don't know how to describe it. It's so much a part of the self. And so like and for me, just it's a wellspring of creativity. And I also think just Caribbean history in general, we've had to create Creole is a created language, the genres of music, right? And so I think, and also just being surrounded by the ocean and bush and green, I don't know, it's just it's inside me. It has to come out.
That's an incredible way of experiencing place, that it's not actually necessarily outside of you, but the sense that almost it's palpably part of you and in you and almost
Yes,
planted within you. And that's such
yes,
a powerful feeling in the book, that it's very much integrated into who you are. And I'm really interested, as somebody who lives on an island and is from an island that has post or colonial and post-colonial experience. I just wondered about the notion of islands, and it struck me even as you were reading, do you think that informs not only how you view space and the world and geography, but also the poem as a form and as an object, as it sits like an island on the page in a sense. And as I read your book again through today, I was kind of struck by that notion of how you could look at them as islands that are almost gathered around each other.
yeah.
I just wondered, how do you miss being on an island? Is it something that, does it feel like home more especially than the US might? That's probably a very complicated question.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the US is home. My family is here, but also like I said, and I think I talked a little bit about that in a previous interview. They're here. And I'll just share this experience. I was sitting in a friend's home here in the US. There was snow on the ground, and I had this surreal experience of like a breadfruit tree growing out of my back, and the sense of St. Lucia is, they're here. I'm here, but I'm also there. It's a part of me. It's inside of me. Um, and so like I guess I carry both homes, right? I'm
Yes.
here. This is my home. There's also my home, and I carry that with me. and it informs me. I cannot unravel the solution that is inside me.
That's a beautiful line. And that sense of, I suppose, the interweaving, it's really interesting that you chose that sense of the weaving of the St. Lucian past and to obviously your North American and Canadian experience, but also the languages as you've discussed, the music, the food, the generations of people who have lived there, and weaving them through poetry. And I just wondered, is that where you go to maybe figure that out or to explore where you live at any particular point, or to maybe find some peace or in actually being someone who has multiple homes or multiple versions of themselves spread across different parts of the world?
So you mean do I go to like poetry to
I think to
um
figure it out, maybe to figure it out,
I
or
think
to
I think to a certain extent, like when you're young and um, you know, because when we moved, we are teenagers, you know, the whole identity, your body's changing lots, and then now you're in a new culture. So I would say yes, initially it was definitely um the place I would go um to sort of navigate this, who am I? You know, where do I fit? Should I throw off St. Lucia and embrace Canada? You know, how do I hold both? So I would say yes. When I first started writing poetry seriously, then yes, it was that place to try and na figure out or navigate identity.
and I think then that kind of sense of interweaving the different languages and the intonations, and even speaking differently as you read the poems out, which is just wonderful to hear you read them. It almost seems to also map that onto what it means to come from somewhere that has been colonized and what that does to language, as you say, you know, absolutely creating an alternative
Yeah.
version. And was that very intentional when you were writing this, or how did you use it to explore these women's experiences?
Sure, I think there was like the Caribbean, you know, sort of English that comes out sometimes when you're with family. You know, for example, I would say I can't do that, which means I can't do that or I don't want, you know, that type of thing that comes out. But for Creole specifically, unfortunately, I don't speak it fluently, but it was going back a few years ago and I spent like a month living with my grandfather, and then I returned again after 9 months, spent another month with him, and I finally found myself open to receiving Creole, and I wanted to try and speak the language more. Um, and and I guess it was like this is my culture, this is my heritage, and so I started listening to Kassav. They're a Martinican band, and they sing in Creole. And started, you know, talking, trying to talk with my grandfather, and then I made that intentional decision. I want this to be in my book, even though I don't speak it fluently, but it's a part of my culture. And just even learning more about Creole, the fact that I learned about that the grammatical structure is actually Wolof, and the words come from Igbo, and a lot of it is like from French. And it was like, oh my goodness, just and I just thought it was just beautiful that these people, they had this imposition of a language on them, different languages, French, English. They were in a place and a culture that wasn't theirs anymore, and they created something. And I love it. I think it just speaks to human resilience, and it's just amazing. I love it.
It is, and it's so palpable as you move through the different sections in the book, this sense of necessity being the mother of invention, and that idea of mothers and the lineage of women and what they pass on, that is very helpful and beautiful, but that is equally a very difficult legacy. And I just wondered how, if you wouldn't mind speaking about maybe the structure of the book and how that came to you, particularly in relation to having this structure of the four generations of women and ending with Catherine, and they all sing together in this beautiful polyphonic experience. And I just wondered how you
Sure.
composed that.
Yeah. Well, one, I would say I love polyphonic voices. I love novels that have different voices. I love the discordance, and I also love the harmony. And I always wanted to write something with multiple generations of women. I was particularly interested in the ripple effects of trauma, how it moves across generational lines, in varying in intensity, sometimes also not intentional on the part of different generations. It was also interesting to see, wanted to see how there's that struggle to do better than the previous generation, and in some ways you redeem something, but in some ways you pass on a dysfunction that you may not have intended. And so I always wanted to write something that was multi-generational. I guess for me, it was just interesting to see how um, violence or trauma or different actions move. They don't just stay within one person or end at a generation, but how they move across time. So that fascinated me.
I think that's something that's so current at the moment, that feeling of those shadows of the past and those violences never actually going away. They just kind of morph and turn into different voices or manifest in different ways, like that brilliant poem that you started with, where like the very personification, I suppose, of evil, um or of violence rather. And I think that's so interesting in terms of what we speak about and what we don't speak about. And I just wondered how you navigated that in terms of, obviously reclaiming the histories of these women, but at the same time acknowledging that this is just, even though in its polyphonic nature, is only going to be whispers of who they actually were in their fullness, and that the book is so conscious of that in a really respectful way that I hugely admire. And I just wondered how you navigated that, or was that kind of one of the central themes as you were moving through the book?
Yeah, so I think not everything needs to be shared. You're right. And for various reasons, personal and otherwise, you can choose to be silent on something. One reason I would speak about I would say there's a poet called Aracelis Girmay, and she wrote about the violence that happens in the real world reality. And then she questioned, should we replicate that? Should we cause further exploitation, or violation of an individual or person, if we do the nitty-gritty, rewrite the nitty-gritty details? So wanting to, again, honor the person and not cause further violation or exploitation. I think then you have certain silences or some things you don't necessarily say out loud, or like you say, you whisper, right? Versus
Yes. It's such an important collection for many reasons, but I think that's one of the most um, profound elements of it, that sense of silence not necessarily being a negative thing or a shutdown, which I think in this current culture is something that we are very much railing against: quietness and silence, and maybe a certain level of acceptance, and not resignation, but an acceptance of suffering being only part of a lineage or a
yes,
story, because there is all of the wonderful food, as you as you describe in your book, all of the consummation, and in consuming, we as humans consume everything. And that's what is so beautiful about this book, is how there is this sense of these people consuming and passing on the rich tapestry of who we are. And is that something, as a writer, that you grapple with? I'm always asked by students, how do you write about people? And this is, we can hold very lightly, but just do you find that an awkward space sometimes about um, your own, like how to facilitate silence, but also write about it, I suppose? Like, how do you write about silence, and how did you find your way into that?
oh, I think that it is a bit of it's a difficult question. I think it's just as I matured as a person, again, I think just asking yourself questions like, Why does this matter to you? Why are you writing about this person? What is it for you? Um, I think so. Understanding your own stakes and also just remembering that this is a human being, right? Um, so yeah, I think so. I think it was a process, and I would say it involved to like not just a skill as a writer, but just emotional maturity as well.
Which is a wonderful skill that is in short supply a lot of the time. And I think in that sense, it's very clear that whole notion of post memory and generational trauma and epigenetics, even, which is an area I've been kind of looking at anyway. And then this book kind of totally expanded my view of that idea of obviously our experiences being passed down to subsequent generations, and obviously us being influenced by them, by even just the stories of the stories of the stories, which is what your wonderful book explores. I'm just going to my final question, because I really want to have a look at, so please, any questions that you might have, please put them in the chat. I'm just going to ask Esther one more question for now, and so you have a little bit of time to ponder and to type it in. Um, I was really struck here when reading the book, but also hearing you, the notion of repetition, because obviously heirlooms are in some way a repetition of a gifting of something,
Yeah.
and lineage is obviously a repetition of a genetic soup across multiple generations. And then there's repetition in language, people who repeat certain things, certain poems repeating certain things, certain words being repeated. And I'm really interested in that being a footprint of this book in terms of what it might mean for you. So I just wondered, as a poet, what does repetition offer you, or how do you feel about repetition in all of its manifestations, I suppose?
Oh my, I think I mean, I think like in the book, I think I'll use what Kwame said. It's both gift and terror. So yeah, in a way it is gift. In a way it is terror. But I also feel like it's also just to me it's just part of the human story. And again, like when I look at these women in the book, how I see them is they are a long song, right? And each brings their variation to that song, right? And so there is some repeating, and that repeating is not necessarily bad, it's not necessarily good. Um, and they vary it, right? They vary it. Especially, I think what I was trying to do with that poem, Catherine, was looking at how Katish changed part of her name. It went from Catherine to Katish, but there's the sound Ka is repeated. And then Catherine went to Catherine-Esther, right? So there's a repetition, but there's a variation of that. And it brings with it, each repetition brings with it its gift and its terror, and it also an opportunity to make something new or to um, vary the song in a different way. This, I don't know, does it make sense?
Oh my God, it makes so much sense. And actually, your book did this, and now your actual words there did something so profound for me, which is, I think I've been, I suppose, experiencing repetition in my work, but also in my life, and generationally for so long, and grappling with it, and actually finding it quite cloying and difficult. And reading your book and speaking to you and hearing you read has kind of blown that wide open for me, in terms of looking at it being like a song, as you say, and like we all have to take up the melody from the previous generation, and then maybe change it into a different key, or pass it on in some other way. And that is, I think, a really important aspect of our moment here, that you so brilliantly explore, that sense of being part of a community now, but of humans that have extended far behind us, and that will extend far, please God, after us. And that sense of connection, I think, which is something so unique to, for me anyway, poetry, and that this book does in a really profound and beautiful way. Um, It's just been so gorgeous to talk to you, and to hear your work. Now, I'm just going to see, do we have, oh, yes. So Lisa says, Lisa Kelly, hi, Lisa. Thank you for this wonderful reading. Can you speak to how you have made the personal universal? It feels that the multiple histories and voices feel almost epic, like the Greek tragedies. How much did personal research interact with classic texts, novels, even like Wide Sargasso Sea? Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, I think there was a lot of research done in relation to St. Lucia, understanding sort of the time. I looked at St. Lucia during World War II. So that was interesting. Read about the Negma War. So research was done there. Um, and perhaps maybe like I'm going to speak broadly. When I think about the Caribbean, I think about it as a microcosm of humanity. Everything's there. Wars, religions, races of people all meeting, rubbing up against each other. Um, so pulling from that, perhaps I'm really I'm not sure what else to say. I think um just pulling from that history, I think in a way it is a microcosm of humanity. There's everything there in that region.
And as you say, you like weaved it all together. So there's like elements of different mythologies and different voices and languages and histories and so on. Um, Another person asks, do you have a hope for any legacy this collection of poems will engender? That's a big question. Was there any intention on your part of this collection changing the course of the legacy of these women? So that idea of your own legacy.
Oh, that's interesting. Let me look at that question again. I just
You
want to
see, it's
think
in
of,
the question and answer.
yeah.
It's the second question there.
I mean, really, the collection was to, I would say, just to give voice to a certain extent and to explore, like I say, how the past imposes or interacts with the present. Um, I think within the collection itself, you do see hope, you do see change. For example, Marie ended up with a man who loved her, right? And he didn't treat her badly, unlike her mom. Um, and then you also see in the daughters where there isn't that physical violence perpetrated. There's some other rippling effects of trauma. So they again, I think you see a legacy of that is both gift and terror. And I think that's just the human story, right? I think we're all trying to do something different, trying to do something better than the previous generation, trying to evolve and grow. And I think, some of that will pass on, but also sometimes the mistakes we make unintentionally will be gifted. Um, so I think there is hope in the book. And I think if you look at the women's stories, you do see hope, you do see the rippling effects of trauma, but there's also hope there as well.
Absolutely. And finally, there's a question about visual art and creating poetry and your processes with each. And do they kind of feed into each other? And are there any specific instances of this in writing this collection? And just before you answer, I'm sure you've all seen the magnificent cover, which my unfortunate filter is ruining, but you'll see it. Jasmine, I'm sure, will put it up again, which you created using collage. It's a stunning cover. So you might answer that and then maybe finish up with the poem before we go back to Jasmine, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, that
Thank you
sounds
so
good.
much, Esther, and huge congratulations. It's an
Thank you.
absolutely stunning book, and I know it's going to end up in all the most beautiful and wonderful places, and enjoy every moment.
Thank you so much, Victoria. So really and truly, when I'm writing, I'm not doing visual art. It's separate. I need to make space for each. But I will say that um, I was given really good advice by a fellow poet. Her name is Alison Moore. She's an art historian, and she said, when you create collage, think of each piece as a line of poetry. And so that has helped. That definitely helped in evolving the art, making it better. Um, I would say that collage, if we look at the concept of collage in constructing the book, in a way it is. It's pulling from history, it's pulling from the personal, it's pulling from different languages, it's pulling from different registers of languages. So I would say, in a way, it's pulling from, I guess, that concept. If we look at the concept of collage, then it's informing the book to a certain extent. Oh, and then yes, the poem. Sorry.
That's
So the
okay.
last poem
That's
I'll
okay.
read.
That was a brilliant answer. That's a really beautiful way of looking at collage. Thank you so much, Esther.
You're welcome. So the last poem I'm going to read is called Aftermath. Oh, hands that wound, even you grew flowers, the red petaled hibiscus, the soft trumpeting yellow bells. Even you grew banana trees and the dashing root, and we too are your blossoms. I am here, muela, muela. The animal of my body chants my praise. I strip to my underwear, press against the cool tiles, let the sun trample my skin, let the light take root inside. Tonight I'll listen to the unlit sky teeming with rain. Tomorrow the hills will sparkle emerald, and one day I will tell another, these hills live in me, Montfortune and Bellevue. And you too fretted this place for your bones, abandoned the great house for a hut on the beach, its siren songs. We thought grandma would tongue your name a curse. She called you daddy, spoke of the coconut heads you split, gave her the water to drink. Who wants to begin in violence? We pressed our fingers to our wound, felt its widening mouth chorus. We are ashamed. Oh, hands that wound, no one sung this song to you, no one rimmed your neck with shame, but so into a girl child what is hidden and hurts. Oh, dead man with your ears stuffed with dirt, I string you into verse, a vengeance, an attempt at teasing out the light, to bear witness. I call you monster, I call you father. How this song blues the kitchen floor, bloodies our feet. Great. Thank you so much to everyone who joined. I really appreciate